One of the most iconic action heroes in movie history almost came with a mustache and a Hawaiian shirt. The movies we grew up loving in the 80s and 90s were never inevitable, and today we're counting down 10 casting near misses that would have given us a completely different version of those films. Some of these stories are legendary, some are genuinely heartbreaking, and at least one is a flat-out myth that we're gonna bust wide open. If you love a good what if, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get into it. Number 10. Billy Crystal almost voiced Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story. We're starting with a story that even the person involved calls his single biggest career regret. Before Tim Allen ever recorded a line as Buzz Lightyear, Pixar director John Lasseter wanted Billy Crystal for the role, and he didn't just send over a casual offer. Lasseter's animation team built a full-screen test where they rigged the Buzz character to perform dialogue straight from When Harry Met Sally. A fully animated space ranger standing beneath a giant wagon wheel coffee table, delivering Crystal's furniture rant beat for beat. That screen test amounted to a love letter designed to win Crystal over, and Crystal still turned it down. After that rejection, the list of actors Pixar cycled through read like a Hollywood phone book, including Bill Murray, Jim Carrey, Michael Keaton, Kevin Costner, Bruce Willis, and Chevy Chase, among others. Lasseter landed on Tim Allen because of his stand-up comedy, explaining that Allen brought them exactly the quality they needed, a macho guy with a soft underbelly. $394 million worldwide on a $30 million budget. That's what Toy Story earned, becoming the first feature-length computer-animated film and picking up a Special Achievement Oscar for Lasseter in the process. Crystal, to his credit, has never sugarcoated the miss, calling himself the schmuck who turned down Toy Story when asked about his biggest professional regret. A happy ending arrived 6 years later when Lasseter phoned to offer him Mike Wazowski and Monsters Incorporated. And Crystal's answer came before the pitch even started. Whatever it is, yes. Number 9. Annette Bening and Sean Young were both in line for Catwoman, before Michelle Pfeiffer. Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman in Batman Returns remains one of the most electric performances in superhero movie history, but that version of the character nearly belonged to someone else entirely. Tim Burton's first pick, Annette Bening, earned the part on the strength of her work in The Grifters and was fully cast when she had to drop out during pre-production after becoming pregnant with Warren Beatty's child. And that's when things took a bizarre turn. Sean Young, who had originally landed Vicky Vale in the first Batman film before a horse riding accident fractured her arm and got her replaced by Kim Basinger, felt outraged at being overlooked again. Young showed up at the Warner Brothers lot uninvited, wearing a homemade Catwoman costume, demanded a meeting, got turned away, and then appeared on the Joan Rivers show still in costume to lobby for the role on live television. None of it worked. Young later spoke to The Hollywood Reporter with total bluntness, claiming that producer John Peters simply preferred Basinger the first time around and that Burton wasn't even present during the confrontation, guessing he'd hidden in the bathroom. Pfeiffer claimed the role and delivered a performance that Variety later ranked as the second greatest ever in a superhero film. Batman Returns pulled in $266 million worldwide, and the roster of actresses who were also reportedly in the running included Susan Sarandon, Meryl Streep, Jodie Foster, Madonna, Cher, Nicole Kidman, and Demi Moore. Number 8. Leonardo DiCaprio chose Titanic over Boogie Nights. Both options here turned out to be extraordinary films, which makes DiCaprio's lingering regret all the more striking. Director Paul Thomas Anderson confirmed on the Smartless podcast that DiCaprio stood as his first choice for Eddie Adams, better known as Dirk Diggler, in Boogie Nights, and that DiCaprio spent several months weighing the decision before choosing James Cameron's Titanic instead. What makes the story especially classy is that DiCaprio personally recommended Mark Wahlberg as his replacement, and Wahlberg went on to earn an Oscar nomination for the role. Even decades later, DiCaprio hasn't let it go. A 2025 Esquire conversation with Anderson became the moment he called Boogie Nights a profound movie of his generation, and admitted that passing on it remained his biggest regret, adding that he couldn't imagine anyone other than Wahlberg in the part, and calling the finished film a masterpiece. Titanic, of course, earned roughly $1.84 billion in its original run, claimed 11 Oscars, including Best Picture, and held the title of highest-grossing film in history until Cameron's own Avatar overtook it in 2010. DiCaprio famously received no Best Actor nomination for the role. Trading a masterpiece for the biggest movie ever made and still considering it a mistake tells you everything about the power of Boogie Nights. Number 7. Tom Cruise nearly played Edward Scissorhands. Before Johnny Depp became Tim Burton's creative partner, Tom Cruise came dangerously close to landing one of the most beloved characters of the early 90s. Depp himself confirmed the near miss in a Burton documentary that debuted at the 2024 Tribeca Film Festival, stating that Cruise stood not far away from actually playing Edward Scissorhands. Cruise wasn't alone in circling the role either. 20th Century Fox's wish list also featured Tom Hanks and, remarkably, Michael Jackson, who, according to co-writer Caroline Thompson, had actively pursued the part. What derailed Cruise's chances, based on multiple accounts of Burton's recollections, were creative differences during their meeting. Cruise pushed for a more upbeat ending and peppered Burton with practical questions about the character's biology. The most famous version of that story, the one where Cruise asks how Edward goes to the bathroom, gets repeated constantly but traces back to secondhand sources rather than any direct Burton quote, so treat it as Hollywood lore rather than hard fact. Meanwhile, Depp nearly refused to even take the meeting, telling his agent to cancel because he figured Burton would never cast him when every A-lister in town wanted the part. His agent's response, cleaned up slightly for this video, amounted to, "Are you out of your mind?" $86 million worldwide on a $20 million budget proved the bet paid off. And that single casting decision launched one of cinema's most iconic partnerships. Burton and Depp collaborated 8 times over the following decades, producing Ed Wood, Sleepy Hollow, and Sweeney Todd, among others. Number 6. The Pretty Woman role almost went to everyone except Julia Roberts. Pretty Woman feels like a movie that couldn't exist without Julia Roberts and Richard Gere, but the original vision looked nothing like what ended up on screen. Director Gary Marshall told Vanity Fair that he initially envisioned Al Pacino and Michelle Pfeiffer in the leads, acknowledging it would have been a fundamentally different film, probably closer to the original script and maybe without the happy ending. That original script deserves its own mention. Written by J.F. Lawton under the title $3,000, it told a far darker story about prostitution, where Vivian ended up thrown from a moving car. The tone shifted dramatically when the project moved from Vestron to Disney's Touchstone Pictures. Before Roberts entered the picture, the parade of actresses who passed or auditioned reached staggering proportions, including Meg Ryan, Michelle Pfeiffer, Daryl Hannah, Karen Allen, and Mary Steenburgen, with Winona Ryder and Jennifer Connelly auditioning but landing on the wrong side of too young. And then there's Molly Ringwald, whose supposed rejection of the role deserves a closer look. Ringwald herself has pushed back on the popular framing, noting in a Reddit AMA that she thought she saw an early draft while it still carried the $3,000 title, but she doesn't specifically remember turning it down. She later told The Guardian that she didn't care for the story and felt something uncomfortable about it, while also pointing out that the darker roles she actually wanted weren't being offered to her. Roberts claimed the part, earned a Golden Globe and her first Oscar nomination, and Pretty Woman brought in $463 million worldwide on a $14 million budget. That single role transformed her into the dominant female movie star of the entire decade. Number 5. Michael Madsen was Tarantino's first choice for Vincent Vega in Pulp Fiction. John Travolta playing Vincent Vega feels like it was always meant to happen, but Quentin Tarantino's original casting notes, leaked and confirmed by multiple outlets, tell a different story. Madsen sat at the top of the list, with Travolta annotated as a strong second option. Madsen had already played Vic Vega, Vincent's brother, in Reservoir Dogs, and Tarantino wanted to keep the family connection alive. Madsen chose Lawrence Kasdan's Wyatt Earp instead, and later acknowledged in the documentary QT8 that Travolta's casting may have been what the film actually needed, pointing to the comeback narrative as part of what made the movie special. Getting Travolta on board still required a fight. Harvey Weinstein pushed for Daniel Day-Lewis, and executive producer Danny DeVito recalled getting called every name in the book over the disagreement, but Tarantino held firm. The deal itself closed during a midnight phone call where producer Mike Simpson told Weinstein to agree right now or lose the project, because 2 other buyers sat waiting outside. $140,000. That's what Travolta earned on Pulp Fiction, $20,000 a week across 7 weeks of shooting, according to producer Lawrence Bender's accounting in Vanity Fair. Travolta joked that by the time he paid for his suite at the Four Seasons, he'd essentially paid for the privilege of being in the movie. That bargain produced staggering returns. Pulp Fiction pulled in $213 million worldwide against an $8 million budget, becoming the first Miramax release to cross $100 million domestically, winning the Palme d'Or at Cannes and collecting 7 Oscar nominations. Travolta, Samuel L. Jackson, and Uma Thurman all received acting nominations, while the film took home Best Original Screenplay. Travolta's career caught fire all over again, leading directly to Get Shorty, Face Off, and Primary Colors. Number 4. John Travolta turned down Forrest Gump to do Pulp Fiction. The Travolta story gets richer when you realize that in the same year he chose Pulp Fiction, he also walked away from Forrest Gump, meaning he potentially sat at the center of 2 of the decade's biggest films and could only pick one. Other actors passed on Forrest too, including Bill Murray and Chevy Chase. Director Robert Zemeckis reportedly favored Bill Paxton, but Paramount didn't believe Paxton carried enough star power. Tom Hanks signed on after spending roughly 90 minutes with the script, attaching one condition: that the film remain historically accurate. When Paramount slashed the budget mid-production, both Hanks and Zemeckis agreed to take percentage points of the gross instead of their full upfront pay. For Hanks, that meant surrendering a $7 million flat fee, and according to Celebrity Net Worth, his back-end earnings from Forrest Gump have reached approximately $70 million and counting. $678 million worldwide on a $55 million budget made Forrest Gump the highest-grossing film of 1994. 6 Oscars followed, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor for Hanks, marking his second consecutive win in that category, a streak no actor had matched since Spencer Tracy in the late 1930s. The final twist played out at the 1995 ceremony. Travolta earned a Best Actor nomination for Pulp Fiction, and his direct competition that night included Tom Hanks for the very role Travolta had turned down. Hanks won. Travolta has admitted in interviews that skipping Forrest Gump counted as a mistake, and the pattern runs deeper than just one film, because he also previously passed on Tom Hanks' roles in Splash and Apollo 13. Number 3. Will Smith turned down The Matrix for Wild Wild West. Will Smith has been completely open about this one. A 2019 video on his own YouTube channel laid out the whole story, starting with an admission that he wasn't proud of it, but it happened. He turned down Neo in The Matrix. What tripped him up wasn't the Wachowskis' vision, but their pitch. Smith described the meeting as the Wachowskis trying to explain bullet time before the technology to demonstrate it existed, talking about jumping and freezing mid-air and rotating the camera 360 degrees around the action. His verdict came down to a single observation, that there's a fine line in a pitch meeting between genius and whatever it was he experienced that day. Smith reunited with Men in Black director Barry Sonnenfeld for Wild Wild West instead, and the contrast in outcomes borders on painful. The Matrix grossed $463 million worldwide on a $63 million budget, winning 4 Academy Awards along the way. Wild Wild West, built on a $170 million budget, scraped together $222 million, and collected 5 Golden Raspberry Awards, including Worst Picture and Worst Director. A casting ripple effect makes this story even more layered. Smith revealed that if he had taken Neo, Morpheus likely wouldn't have gone to a black actor because the studio had been eyeing Val Kilmer for that role, which means his decision didn't just alter his own career, but shape the entire cultural fingerprint of the franchise. Keanu Reeves, who accepted Neo, reportedly took home $10 million up front, plus 10% of the back end, putting his first film earnings around $35 million, according to Celebrity Net Worth, with his total across the trilogy reaching an estimated $200 million. Number 2. Eric Stoltz shot 7 weeks of Back to the Future before being replaced. Most casting near misses involve somebody turning down a role or losing an audition. This one stands apart because Eric Stoltz didn't almost play Marty McFly. He actually played the part for 7 full weeks of principal photography. Co-writer Bob Gale and director Robert Zemeckis wanted Michael J. Fox from the very start, but Fox's Family Ties showrunner Gary David Goldberg, already short-staffed because Meredith Baxter was on maternity leave, refused to even hand Fox the script. Universal pushed Eric Stoltz, coming off strong work in Mask, and cameras rolled on the 26th of November, 1984. Problems surfaced almost immediately. Stoltz committed to a method approach that clashed with the film's comedic tone. Co-star Claudia Wells recalled him phoning her house in character, introducing himself as Marty, and Thomas F. Wilson, who played Biff, told a podcast that Stoltz got physically intense during confrontation scenes, grinding his hands hard into Wilson's collarbones. On the 30th of December, 1984, Zemeckis screened the footage with his editors and recognized it wasn't working. And on the 10th of January, 1985, he let Stoltz go. Zemeckis later called that decision the worst experience of his career, praising Stoltz as brilliant while acknowledging a clear miscast. Bob Gale added more context in a 2025 Guardian interview, explaining that Stoltz had interpreted the story as a tragedy because Marty ends up in a different version of 1985, which meant the humor the character needed simply wasn't showing up on screen. $4 million in reshoot costs hit the budget. Fox juggled Family Ties by day and Back to the Future by night and on weekends. And co-star Donald Foley-Love recalled at a 2026 reunion event that scenes requiring 4 weeks under Stoltz got completed with Fox in roughly 73 hours. Back to the Future became the #1 film of 1985, held the top spot for 11 of its first 12 weekends, and earned around $381 million worldwide. Fox became a global star, and Stoltz built a respected career that included a Golden Globe nomination for Mask and a move into television directing on shows like Glee and Grey's Anatomy. Number 1. Tom Selleck was cast as Indiana Jones and lost the role to his TV contract. This is the granddaddy of all casting what-ifs, and it earns the top spot because Tom Selleck didn't merely audition or get a callback. He screen-tested, received the offer, and accepted the role. For a brief window of time, he was Indiana Jones. George Lucas explained the thinking behind looking past Harrison Ford, describing a worry about becoming too closely linked to one actor the way Scorsese and De Niro were, and saying he wanted to create a new icon. They found Selleck, but the moment CBS caught wind of it, the network picked up his option on Magnum PI and locked the door. Selleck's 2024 memoir, You Never Know, and a May 2024 Today Show appearance filled in the details. He'd wanted the role badly, and both Spielberg and Lucas kept the offer open, promising to work around his Magnum schedule so he could do both projects. But the harder they pushed, the more CBS dug in, and the network simply would not release him. The cruel twist came courtesy of a 1980 Screen Actors Guild strike that delayed Magnum's shooting by months, long enough that Selleck could theoretically have done both films. By that point, Ford already had the part. Lucasfilm shot Raiders in England under equity rules to get around the SAG stoppage, and production moved forward without waiting on the resolution. Harrison Ford addressed the history in a 2023 Deadline interview by putting it simply, Selleck had the job but also carried an existing obligation to a television series. Costume designer Deborah Nadoolman Landis even revealed to Empire that she had built a complete head-to-toe prototype Indiana Jones costume specifically for Selleck. He wasn't a rumor or a fallback option. $389 million worldwide, the highest-grossing film of 1981. 8 Oscar nominations, 5 wins. Raiders of the Lost Ark launched one of the most successful franchises in cinema history, spanning 5 films and counting, and Ford became inseparable from the character in a way that defined his entire career. Selleck, meanwhile, took home a lead actor Emmy for Magnum in 1984 and built a durable television career stretching all the way to Blue Bloods, which he anchored starting in 2010. Bonus myth bust. O.J. Simpson was never seriously considered for The Terminator. Before we wrap up, one casting near-miss story needs debunking because it gets repeated everywhere, and it's not true. Arnold Schwarzenegger himself has claimed on multiple occasions that O.J. Simpson served as the first cast Terminator and that Arnold originally wanted to play Kyle Reese. James Cameron has flatly denied all of it, repeatedly. A 2019 Los Angeles Times interview and a later appearance on HBO Max's Who's Talking to Chris Wallace covered the same ground. Cameron saying that Arnold was simply wrong, that Simpson never entered the real conversation, and that the idea died before gaining any traction. Cameron identified the studio executive who floated Simpson's name as Orion's Mike Medavoy and described the filmmaker's reaction as thinking it amounted to the stupidest idea they'd ever heard. He also corrected the Arnold side of the story, confirming that Schwarzenegger was never offered Reese. Next time someone brings up the O.J. Terminator story at a party, you can set the record straight. Conclusion. 10 moments where Hollywood history balanced on something razor thin. Tom Selleck lost Indiana Jones because of a television contract. Eric Stoltz lost Marty McFly because he brought the wrong kind of brilliance to a comedy. Will Smith lost Neo because a pitch meeting didn't land. And John Travolta traded one masterpiece for another, only to watch the guy who took his rejected role beat him for the Oscar. Every one of these decisions triggered a chain reaction. Travolta's Pulp Fiction comeback doesn't happen if Madsen skips Wyatt Earp. Depp's entire career path shifts if Cruise accepts Burton's ending. The cultural identity of The Matrix changes completely if Smith says yes. The films we quote, rewatch, and carry around in our heads weren't destined to exist in the forms we know them. Scheduling conflicts, gut instincts, and midnight phone calls shaped all of them, and the greatest movies ever made sat one decision away from becoming something unrecognizable. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me which alternate universe casting you'd most want to see. I'll catch you in the next one.